Welcome everyone. My name is Dawn Duvall and I'm with Shall We Stamp and I'm located in the Villages, Florida. And today we're going to be working with a piece of 12 by 12 designer series paper or patterned paper. And I'm sure you're probably like the rest of us that we tend to buy all this pretty paper and then we tend to hoard it and not use it. So we're going to do a one sheet wonder, which means we're going to take this piece of 12 by 12 designer paper and we're going to cut it up in using a template where we're going to make 10 cards. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Now this paper is black and white and this is from Stampin' Up. It's called True Love Designer Series paper. And this can be found in our January to June spring catalog of 2021. And this recording is March 25th, 2021. So we're going to use this paper. I'm going to do some coloring when I put these together, so you can kind of see some different ways that if you have a black and white paper, how you can use that. But the idea is to use your template and get ideas of how you can make multiple cards. So let's go ahead, and here is the template that we're going to be using. And we're going to be starting out with a cut at 5 1/4. And so we're going to cut down and then we're going to cut out and make these different size pieces that we'll be able to use to make our card. All right, so let me go ahead and move this out of the way. So the first one we're going to start with is going to be our 5 1/4 by 4. So I'm going to cut 5 1/4 is going to be my first cut. And we'll go ahead and place this in here. And this is Stampin' Up's trimmer. So if you're not familiar with this has an arm that opens up to 17 inches, if you can see. And the nice thing about this trimmer is that it has on the board itself every 1/4 inch, and it's also listed in inches and metric. And this trimmer can be found through my online store, and it's $25. It's awesome. Stampin' trimmer. The other nice thing about it is you can go over on this side if you're cutting up to 1 1/2, so it makes it a little bit easier to manage the paper. Okay, so we're going to make our first cut at 5 1/4. So there's 5, and then we're going to line this up at the 5 1/4 mark. And the nice thing about this trimmer is it does have a header up here, so you can butt your paper up to that. And then at the bottom, it also has one as well, so depending on which way that you're using your trimmer. Now you have a scoring blade, which is the light colored one, and then you have a darker blade, which is your cutting blade. So you always want to make sure whichever one you're not using is out of the way. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull this down at 5 1/4, and then according to the instructions, we're going to turn this and we're going to cut 2 at 4 inches. So we're going to cut a 4-inch square here, or a rectangle. We're going to do another 4-inch. So you get 3 4-inches right out of 12. All right, so that leaves us with one more 4-inch. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut this in half. So we're going to move this over to the 2-inch mark. And we want to make sure it's lined up. And we're going to cut this at 2 inches. So now we have our first 4 pieces of our paper. So I'm going to set those right there. Now the second column is where we're going to cut at 3 1/2. So we're going to do a 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. We're going to do a 3 1/2 by 4 1/4, and then we're going to do another 3 1/2 by 4 1/4. But this one we're going to cut at an angle, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so let's line this up at 3 1/2. So we're going to bring it over to our 3 1/2 mark, and make sure it's lined up at both ends. And we're going to pull down and cut. I'm going to set this one aside. Now we're going to turn and we're going to do 3 1/2. So we're going to have a 3 1/2 inch square. So we'll cut up at that. And then we're going to do a 3 1/2, which is what we already cut our paper at, but this one's going to be at 4 1/2. So we're going to move this one over to the 4 1/2 mark. All right, and we're going to cut that there. And that leaves us with this 4 1/4, right? So we're going to turn this at an angle. Now what you want to do is you want to line up your points in your cutting trimmer, in your cutting blade, in the track. So I've got that in the center and I'm going to hold my thumb there, and then I want to get this one positioned so it's in the right spot, okay? And then we're going to place this down, and then I've got my blade right above this point. So I'm going to place this down, I'm going to come back once and then go straight up. And then there's my 2 pieces that we'll use for the angle. Now our paper is double-sided, so we have the option to use whichever sides that we choose to use, okay? All right, and then the last piece is cut at 3 1/4. So this one should be at 3 1/4 if we've calculated correctly, and it is. So we're going to turn this and we're going to do a 3 1/4 square. So we're going to do another cut, 3 1/4, and we're going to do 2 of these. So we want 2 3 1/4 squares. So let's line this up at 3 1/4. Okay, and then our last piece should be 3 1/4 by 5 1/2. And we're going to move over to the 5 1/2 mark, and it is. So that's all the cutting that we need to do. All right, so let me make these cards and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, I am back. Here is the first card, which was 5 1/4 by 4. And this one I'm using Just Jade cardstock. I used our blending brushes and did a little bit of blending on 3 of the flowers. I punched out the sentiment, used the coordinating ink, and then I did a 1/2 inch by 4 and a piece of the Just Jade cardstock as well. Now, inside I left blank, but normally I would put a piece of Whisper White, which is 4 by 5 1/4, and that will be what you would write on the inside to write your sentiment. I leave mine blank until I'm ready to send them out. All right, so that's the first card. So we'll look at that one. Let me get this out of the way here. All right, so that's the first card. All right, and then the second card is the same. I did this one in Magenta Madness, and I blended most of the flowers on this one. And then I cut out a small circle punch with the sentiment of hello and put that on a circle of basic black cardstock. And this is blended with Magenta Madness ink and the Just Jade. All right, and then the next one is we have 2 cards that will be 2 inches here by 5 1/4. So this is that card. The first one I colored it with Bermuda Bay using our Stampin' Blends, which are alcohol markers. I cut a piece of 2 1/4 basic black for the matte, and then I stamped our sentiment and put some of our black matted dots on that. And the second one, that's the same size, I used Highland Heather. Now this one, I cut the cardstock at 4 1/4 by 11. And then I put this black matte, I cut it at 2 1/8. And then I took our Stampin' Blends in Highland Heather and I colored in every other white line just to give it a little bit more definition, if you can see that. And then I used one of our punches with our sentiment. Okay, and then the next section we're moving to is the center section, which is 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. And then we'll have 3 1/2 by 4 inches. And then we're going to do the 3 1/2 by 4 1/4. And we're going to do that as a diagonal. So the first one I did was 3 1/2 by 3 1/2. And I matted that on a piece of real red cardstock. And I used our real red Stampin' Blends to color this as well. And our Granny Apple Green. I also did the sentiment on a strip of Whisper White and did the same thing. And both of these are popped up on dimensionals. And then the next card is 3 1/2 by 4 1/4. So this one I did landscape, and this is on Just Jade. And again, I used our Magenta Madness Stampin' Blends, a piece of the coordinating ribbon, and stamped our sentiment on the front and popped that up with dimensionals as well. All right, and then the next one is our 3 1/2 by 4 1/4 that we cut in an angle. So I did the reverse side of this one. And again, this is 4 1/4 by 11, so it opens like that. And I put a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 piece of Whisper White underneath, and then used our Memento black ink to stamp my sentiment. And then the other corner that I did on that one, I colored in the paper using our Gorgeous Grape. Again, this is cut at 4 1/4 by 11, and I attached that on a base of Highland Heather, and then did stamping just the sentiment of just the flower on the background to give it a little bit of texture. Then the next one, we're moving to the third column, which is going to be a 3 1/4 square. We're going to have 2 of those. So the first one I did is on Melon Mambo, and this one I used our blending sponges again, highlighting just one of the flowers, and then I cut a banner that says thank you and wrapped a little bit of our pink baker's twine and tied that into a knot. And then the next card is 3 1/4 by 3 1/4, and this one I just laid the paper straight on the black cardstock, and I colored these with our Highland Heather Stampin' Blends and used a piece of the Gorgeous Grape ribbon and attached our sentiment with dimensionals. And then the last card, which is 3 1/4 by 5 1/2, I did on Bermuda Bay. This one I sponged most of the flowers, colored the leaves using mint macaron Stampin' blends, used our Tag Tailor punch, stamped the sentiment, and popped that up on dimensionals. So there we have our 11 cards. So there are the 11 cards that I made with this template. So I hope you've enjoyed this template and your cards, and I'd love to see what you've done when you have completed your cards. So if you want to send me a link or post them on my page, that would be great. Again, I'm Dawn with Shall We Stamp, and you can shop my online store, and I'll have the information listed in the video. All right, thanks again. I hope you all have a great day.